the business podcast Mastermind. Just to refresh you what you're into here. We started with a few talented friends in the business and podcasting space, and then expanded it to create a weekly event where a wider audience can join. I'll introduce you to our co-hosts. We have here Rob Greenlee. He is the VP of Content and Partnerships at Libsyn, chair of the Podcast Academy, co-host of the New Media Show, and longtime evangelist in the podcasting industry. You also see Henry Lopez, a serial entrepreneur, small business coach, and host of the top-rated How of Business podcast, dedicated to helping others start, run, and grow their small businesses. Also a co-host who's not here today is Vinay Koshi. He's the host of the Predictable B2B podcast, founder of Sproutworth. He helps others achieve predictable business growth and influence through content marketing. And I'm Ethan Janney, business and executive coach and co-host of the Run With It podcast, which invites 7+ figure entrepreneurs to share business ideas and the action steps to launch them. And on today's episode, we've invited a new friend of mine, Nikki Skeen. And we'd like to talk to him because he has quite a bit of experience with public speaking and coaching people in public speaking. He also does something called the Global Inspiration Tours, which I've participated in, which is very interesting. But Nikki, why don't you give us a little bit of your background before we get started?
Ethan, thank you so much for having me, for inviting me. I was lucky being around when TED introduced the TEDx program. And by then I was in advertising and I thought, well, I just acquired a company in Austria now. How about inspiring the people with something that inspires me? And I did TEDx events in Austria for 7 years. And every TED conference starts with a program for the TEDx community. So before the big people come into the room, 3 days before that, the TEDx community gathers in the venue and talks about the quality and about curation, about formats. And I was there to come up with some ideas how to grow this community from day one. And I was lucky, and TED invited me being a TEDx ambassador. That exposed me to a community of 4,000 licensees in 185 countries, and 100 of them invited me being part of their conference as a speaker coach. Most of them for most of them as a speaker coach. I hosted a few, I gave a few TEDx talks, but for about roughly 1,500, 2,000 speakers, I was coach. I joined them. I went with them from being invited, rough idea, to being on the stage. And that's my background. I have this very privileged life of spending most of my lifetime with people who see things others don't and learning from them. That's something that I weave into the curation of the tours where you participate earlier.
Awesome. Yeah, this is a great background. Really interesting to hear about all of this stuff. So basically what we'll do is, I think usually what we do is I'll ask a bunch of questions up front and then we'll hand it over to the group, but anybody can feel free to interject if we have comments or questions. But I think I would say maybe my first question, because we're kind of directing this towards podcasters, is, and we've been talking a lot about our audiences and figuring out who our audiences are and how to speak with them and how to present to them in a way where they get excited and they share about what we're doing. So did you come across this kind of a topic when you're training the speakers in terms of understanding the audience? And if so, how did you approach that?
Very much so. I think one of the important questions, and that's like for a talk as much as for a podcast, but actually for any kind of conversation, sorry, is asking yourself the question, who am I talking to? And you really have to know your audience. You really have to know the people you're talking to, because some people feel physical pain if you talk too much. They make their own assumptions right after the third word. They know where the sentence is going. Others want to know about you as a human. They want to know about your hobbies, where you spend your weekend. And if you have an hour with them, 5 minutes is business and 45 minutes or 55 minutes is connecting as a human. Otherwise, they think you only want their money. Others want to understand the process. They want to see where you're coming from and what got you where you are today, with your idea, with your thoughts, with your vision. And if you don't have a process, if you don't have a structure, they would not trust you. They would just see that you're a 1 day's fly, that you just came up with something that's a question of good luck, but you will never repeat that success because there's no process behind. And others are having a very hard time listening They only want to talk, right? They would only listen to you if you come in Tony Robbins style tweetable quotes in a series of every other sentence, deliver something that you can extract and either put on your own wall, or when you meet your friends, use that and inspire them, and be grateful that they would call you inspiring. And you see, it's already four very different types of people. And for some, it might, so right, if your audience is, if you deliver a podcast for an audience that's probably tier one management, they have to be very fast with decision making. They have to be very fast with understanding. You can't make your point twice. You have to race through topics and be very fast with how you challenge them as a listener, right? You can actually even give them a little too much of digestible information because they enjoy being challenged. But if your audience is more people who are very, very specific in their space, right? I don't want to call them nerds, but it's kind of everyone knows what I'm talking about. They want to understand process, right? They're keen in following process. You can lose yourself in details and they would love it, because the more specific and detailed it gets, the more they enjoy listening to you, right? And now compare them with the other audience. Right? Either way, if you put the wrong language, the wrong depth, the wrong speed into your material, you already only have a 25% chance of hitting the right nerve. And when you have your audience who's in a lifestyle, right, their focus is on sports and activities and work-life balance, whatever that means, they love stories, they love anecdotes, they love to hear about how you spend your weekend with people on the beach. And then you come to the content and they just enjoy the journey with you. They came to listen for stories. They didn't really come to extract that core information. They just want to hear you every other day for an hour because they like you. They bond with you, right? There's a lot of podcasts where there is no content, but it's good conversation. You feel like you're part of their lives because you might not have your own life. So you enjoy being part of other people's life, right? And I think it's really important. It's like, who do I actually want to talk to? And very often you don't want to cross a box. You identify, who am I? Right? Where do I feel home? Do I get nervous if people don't stop talking? Then that's probably also the same breed that you attract. And on, I guess you get the point, right? I think it's crucial to get to know the people you want to address.
So question is, which type are you? Have you figured that out, or are you kind of like a chameleon?
I'm a bit of a chameleon because it's part of my work to kind of go into the boots of the people I talk to. But I know that I would be probably the person who feels physical pain if you talk too much, right? I feel like, I got it, but no, I have to be polite. So I have to show and pretend I'm still interested and surprised what comes next. And I don't, you don't want to be mean, you don't want to be impolite, and you don't want to be rude. But also that means that I don't have strong social life because no one goes out on a Thursday night to talk about exponential organizations.
Right. Okay, fair enough. So I'm curious, like in the process of coaching these TEDx talks, were you aware of, is it just a mixed audience, or the audience is pretty much the same? Like, are you seeing situations where it's going to be mostly executives versus mostly people who want to just listen to a story? What have you seen there?
Very good question. Thank you for that. For the TEDx talk, it's slightly different because you might have 100, 500, 1,000, 3,000 in the audience, but way more will watch your talk online. So basically you're addressing the archetype of the beneficiary of your idea, right? For who did I have, or who do I deliver this talk? For who did I prepare this idea? And it might either be the person who conducts the change or the person who's the beneficiary, as I said before, of the concept of the idea, right? Very often people who benefit from your concept, your idea, your problem we're solving are not the ones who make the decision, right? You have to figure out like how can I bring the problem into the room with the right people? Very often the people who suffer from the problem, they don't need to be explained. They don't have to explain the problem. But those who make the decision to solve it, You have to bring it into their lives.
Got it. Yeah, that is interesting. So what I think could be, I'm curious to like go around between us and see what kind of audiences we think we have. My particular podcast, um, we've been shifting it a little bit and we may find a different audience, but I think it's actually a mix of that. Just give me the facts. It's like a little bit into the nerd out territory, but not too deep. It's a little bit into that executive territory, meaning I want you to push me with extra information. But then there's also the, hey, let's just have some fun and let's have a chat and let's spend some time together. And we have two hosts. So that's what's kind of interesting. I'm noticing probably my co-host is a little bit more in the realm of kind of let's get this really solid information out there. And I'm more in the realm of, all right, let's have a laugh here because this has been a little bit intense, or just sort of bringing in a mix of things.
Your co-host is also an engineer, so that makes sense, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Has that engineering mind.
That's part of why we work well together. We have different. I'm more the creative side of things. He's more of the technical side of things. But do you think, Nikki, just hearing me explain it though, does it sound like maybe we need to be a little bit more clear on who that audience member is? And pick one of those 4 categories that you mentioned, or do you find that it's that's just what it is if it's a mix of things?
So ideal scenario is you're very specific with who you're talking to, right? Because the more you talk to more different people, the more you risk that they don't feel addressed, right? You don't go to a bar and say, hey, ladies, you want to go home with me tonight? You go to one lady and make her feel special, right?
But I want to separate the two things because we might be talking about two things here, Nikki. I'm sorry. We were talking about the type of listeners, but also our beneficiary. Are we talking about two different things here? In other words, my beneficiary could be one of those 4 types, right? So I need to target my content to the beneficiary.
I would say that I'm addressing the people you're listening to, because if they are addressing someone else, you have to help them with vocabulary.
Okay, but what I'm asking is, for example, my audience are, let's say they're aspiring entrepreneurs. They come in different flavors. The type that gets sick of hearing me talk, the one that wants to hear all the detail. So there's a mix of those type of people that are beneficiaries of what I'm sharing. Am I understanding it right?
Okay, so I understand what you're saying. At least I think. So what I would suggest is that you give these people, the German word is Sollbruchstelle, which is basically where things have to break, otherwise bigger things happening, right? When you have a car accident, there are several parts of the car where the car has to break to make sure that the passengers survive. This is called Sollbruchstelle. What I'm saying is, if you have 2 different sorts of audience and one of them feel physical pain if you talk too much, others like more process and details, give the first an exit door, right? Prepare your podcast that they can leave at 10 minutes at any time, right? Any episode they can leave after 10 minutes because they heard everything they need to hear. And then you switch gears and go into the meat, and it's like, okay, now we've covered what we want to talk about. Let's go into specifics. And
it's the approach of when newspapers write an article, you get the gist of it in the first 2 paragraphs, and then if I want more, I keep reading, right?
Yeah, the other thing too, I think to clarify, I think when Nikki was talking about the beneficiary sort of versus the one that's going to make something happen, that was a little bit more towards the TED Talk thing. So somebody could say, yeah.
Yeah, no, but it just applies to us because the challenge that we have as podcasters is we can't see our audience. So we try the best to understand who they are. And the longer we're at it, the better we have a feel for that. But we don't know who's out there. And so that makes it particularly challenging.
So Seth Godin's answer to this is people like us do things like this, which basically means you decide who you want to attract.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. And that's what I try to do, Nikki, is I say, and I think you were speaking to this in a part, all I can do is speak to someone like me, another person who also wants to talk about entrepreneurship. But it's important to add these elements, and that's why I'm glad to have you on, as to how to make that most effective. Giving that exit is a good example. I recap at the end of the show is another example, but it helps to also address, Ethan and Nikki, why, I've always struggled with, if I look at my listens, the time that they listen, there's this big drop off at about 30 minutes. However, when I've spoken to a lot of my audience members, they tell me how much they appreciate the summary at the end. So it's always that, okay, what do? I shorten my episode? Or is it more like what you're talking, Nikki, where I need to give that exit to that person who's had enough at 30 minutes?
And I think that's cool to design a podcast where everyone who feels like I'm good can leave after 30 minutes. And there is a core who really enjoys going into specifics, who knows that that's my time now. Mm-hmm. And you can actually really switch language where that it's more of a birds of the same feather thing. And the first part might be those who might not understand what you're doing, but they might, they might book you or pay for your services.
I wanted to comment on this too. I mean, we're basically analyzing what the psychological interests of our audience are. And as podcasters, we also have to keep in mind that we're always trying to build the biggest audience, right? So how would you suggest that we think about this from the standpoint of those four different types of listeners? Is it a matter of creating each one of those experiences in our podcast? And if people drop off at midpoint, that's okay. They got what they wanted out of the episode. The others stick around to get more. And that's the strategy to grow a larger audience. But at the end of the day, I'm going to do a podcast based on what my skills and ability are. And the audience is going to self-select itself based on those choices.
I think that if you're, and I don't know what you guys are doing and talking about, to be honest, but if you're experts in the space, my hypothesis is that you don't hit the nerve of all the four different archetypes anyways. All right, you probably hit two, probably one that's in your space and probably one who pays you. That's often the case.
So all we can really hope for is hitting two. Is that what you're saying? Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's fair. Yeah. Sorry.
I was going to say, it sounds like recognizing which one is your audience already and then doubling down on that can help. If I know, for example, that I have an audience that wants almost a little bit too much information because they like the challenge, start packing in more and more information, right? Or if I know I'm leaning towards an audience that wants to hear, what I did over the weekend, make sure and include that and don't skip over that, or create the right balance of that type of thing. Does that sound like the way that you would approach it, Nikki?
Does it make sense for you?
The problem with doubling down on it also can limit your audience potential too, I would think. So, how do you walk those lines, right? Because I do think a TED Talk is quite different than a podcast. I mean, a podcast is an ongoing relationship that you're building, that you get put in situations where you talk about a lot of different, maybe not dramatically different topics, but there is a different flow to it. It's longer, it's more detailed, there's more personal, there's more details in there. I think there is an opportunity to cover more of those ground areas. But like you said, if you do that detailed stuff that that certain community wants at the upfront, if they listen halfway and they drop off, they got what they wanted, right? That's not failure in my book.
I agree, and I think that you're totally right with the differentiating a TED Talk or a TEDx talk with a podcast, because for a TED Talk it's a one thing, right? It's a one shot. You've got your 18 minutes.
Yep. It's a presentation.
But with the podcast, you build relationship. That means that you have to stand for something. You have to be a niche. You have to be specific for something. Mm-hmm. And with a TED Talk, you can give a TED Talk at that conference 2 years later, completely different TED Talk at a different conference, and both can be a success.
Right.
But for a podcast, if every podcast is different, no one really feels like, I don't know if the next one's for me, and they won't risk signing in for an hour of wasted lifetime.
Well, that's the power of the host. The host builds that, what I call a red thread through all the episodes, right? That's the reason that audiences come back, is the host, not the guest, because the guests come and go, right? There's different people, and shows that emphasize the guest too much have very, I would say, very erratic download numbers based on the popularity of the guests. So building that reputation with your audience where they're coming to hear you with this guest is the key, I think, in that, and I think that your points are really good though, because it helps you kind of take the potential audience that you have and put it in buckets of how they think, right? And to create content that maybe caters to as many of those as you can. I don't know if it's possible though, like you said.
And I have to say, I'm not expert in podcasts, right? I
Right.
don't even have
Right.
one. So you know a lot better what works and what does not work.
Well,
I only bring my perspective from
Right.
stages where you have
Right.
people sitting in the audience. And if you say like, that doesn't make sense for me, I would totally like I'm sure you're right.
right. I mean, is there a resource that podcasters can go look at that they can dig deeper into those 4 different types of people and what their interests are and how they want information?
I have to admit that it's something that's kind of a combination of thoughts of profiling.
I gotcha, of your own.
Profiling,
Okay.
that I don't think that there is a reader behind that, because it's more of a thing that I've observed and put together.
I gotcha.
I guess Briggs Meyer gets as close as possible to those if you really want to go into profiling. But then I think what I like that's why I've been using it. I like it because it's fast.
Right.
Right. If you're standing in front of someone who has a lot of patterns and I don't know, palm trees on his shirt, he wants to hear your weekend stories. If you have someone who's unicolor, black and white, he is the tier 1 management. He's fast. If you're someone who has the Apple Watch, big latest fashion, he is the Tony Robbins quotable guys. If you have someone who has lines of stripes, he's the process guy. Right? You can spot it out instantly when you're talking to people. Like, where do I put them? That's what I like with it. Briggs Myers, you to start, it's very complicated. You can't do this in 20 seconds or 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. That's interesting.
So do you have names for each of these archetypes, or you just
so
kind of
in advertising we
them?
did body copy, headline, illustration, and logo.
Body copy, headline,
Illustration and logo.
okay, interesting. Illustration and logo. So the logo one is the Apple Watch.
Flashy guy.
Got it. And the illustration is the
Weekend guy.
Is the weekend guy. Okay, interesting.
Body copy is headline is CO.
Okay.
And
It's more of a creative professional, right? Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Well, the headline is the person that wants, they want like high impact stuff, like
4 words, and I've understood everything.
Right. And the body copy is the nerd.
Body copy is the nerd, exactly.
Got it. Oh, interesting. I like how you connect that. Okay, cool. And
That's
the
from my
logo guy.
advertising history.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
and in advertising, is that something that they talk about in advertising, that those different segments are for different audiences, or that's just something you applied?
Something that we've applied. I was at McKinney Erickson when we compiled that, and it's kind of a team effort to everyone came in with their understanding of NLP, of profiling. There are some colors, and then you have the letters. There are so many profiling versions in circulation,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm careful with those. Right? I like it that it's inaccurate. I like it that there is some shade of gray and it's not like sharp borders.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's inaccurate, it's faster, and it's okay. You're right. If you know it's not 100% on spot, it's okay, right? You're not like, but you're a headline, you can't be anything else. But with the letters, it's so specific, right? You basically put too many, put people in a box, and no one wants to be put in a box.
And I know a lot of the tech companies use this concept of building personas around who their product users are. And they'll create like 5 or 6 different profiles and that definitely plays into what you're saying here. I mean, and they'll create different user scenarios based on those profiles. Right.
Because in design thinking, you create customer journeys, and in the customer journey, you have different touch points, right? You understand life is a series of events,
right? And
you want to understand which event do I turn into an experience, so I create a relationship with my customer.
Right.
And so you have personas and their journeys, their customer journeys, because there's always before, during, and after the touch point of the brand, the product, the company, the service, or whatever it is. If you don't get the full picture, again, you're playing lottery and you don't want to play lottery. And that's kind of the good part with design thinking, that they start a lot earlier with understanding where does my audience come from. And yeah, and then they work with personas, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been on a few of those studies. I used to work for Microsoft for many years, and we did those kind of breakdowns. Yeah.
Now, for Henry, I think as I think about it, I would say if I had to pick between those four categories, having listened to your podcast, it does seem like the sort of nerd profile is the one that sounds like it makes the most sense. You're giving good information. You're getting down to specifics. You don't talk. You're not too much, just shooting the breeze about things that are just kind of like having fun. But it's
always actionable, detailed information. So
right.
That person that just needs a few words, and often entrepreneurs have that personality in my observation, but mostly my audience is aspiring entrepreneurs and very small business owners, right? So really they're business owners, not entrepreneurs as we think of them. And so, yeah, I understand what he's saying, that person just needs a few pieces of information and they've got it, right? But it is interesting how that mix of people. How there is that mix of people. It's interesting. I got a comment so one of the primary ways I get feedback as to who my audience is when they schedule a free consultation. I'm asking right up front, how'd you find me? What do you like about the show? That kind of thing. And a client of mine told me something interesting. She says that she gets frustrated with podcasts that are too long for her. For her, 30 minutes is a maximum, because she gets frustrated that she can't finish them. And then it's this looming thing that she hasn't finished. And so it causes her not to listen to the show at all, which is an interesting observation that I had not really ever thought about. So there is that type as well, Nikki, that feels like, okay, you're giving me too much. I want it, but because I can't finish it, I'm not even going to start the next one, right? Because it's like people who I read multiple books, and sometimes I'll be like, well, I can't get another book until I finish these 3 that I've started. And so that's an interesting dynamic.
So from the stage, there is this, so the talks and pitches, they have a few things in common. It's different to the podcast, I guess, because the job of a 2 minutes pitch is curiosity, ignite curiosity for more, right? Sure. You don't want your audience to say, I've understood. You want your audience to say, very interesting, tell me more.
Tell me more, yeah.
Same applies for 5 minutes. Same applies for 80 minutes. I think for a podcast where it's about an hour, right? That's a usually length.
30 minutes to an hour, I think, is what most of us are at, probably.
The job of the hour is, I want to have a conversation with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I'd like to jump in just because what is common, though, and what we can learn, I think, is certainly the craft of storytelling. But I am curious on one thing, Nikki, first. When people deliver a TED Talk, are they memorizing it, or are there teleprompters? As it depends. I've just always been curious about that. It doesn't look like they're reading from a teleprompter, but how does that work?
No teleprompter. So the good speakers are memorizing it. There are a lot of speakers who say, I only have that one shot. I need the energy of the room. I only have this one thing. As a matter of fact, their talks are never really good.
Interesting.
The rule by thumb is an hour of rehearsal for a minute of speaking. So you really want to, if you're not good at learning by heart, then you have to go through it more often. So you have different versions of every part of your talk that you can choose from.
That comes to you in that moment, but you have to have it somehow memorized.
The speakers will say, I need this one shot, and I tell them to rehearse. The first thing that happens when they start rehearsing is they get worse. Right. Because they lose their confidence, but they didn't rehearse enough to reacquire new confidence. Yeah. So they actually have to rehearse a little more than others, because they have to go over this valley of, I don't feel comfortable anymore. So I'm neither really well prepared, nor do I have the energy of the moment. There is no shortcut.
So what makes for a good TED Talk?
So not that one answer. The four levels. Who am I talking to? Why should they care? What should they say differently after the talk? And why me is a good companion when you write your talk. Like, yes, I've checked that boxes. when you want to attract an audience for a topic, you must have to make it relevant for the audience, because when I listen to you every 70 seconds, so that's kind of the attention span that we're facing right now, every 7 seconds your audience decides if they continue listening to you. So it basically means they asking themselves, what's in it for me? Right? When I listen to you, what's in it for me? What do I have? Do I grow? Do I expand my views? Do I connect with someone, or whatever it is? There must be something that's in it for me when I listen to you. And that's what really good TED Talks, when you look at, I mean, I guess the Sir Ken Robinson talk is the most successful talk, been aggregated views of 300 million because it's been shown in front of so many classes.
Which one?
Why School Kills Creativity, from Sir Ken Robinson. Okay. What he does really well, and you see this pattern in TED Talks you enjoy listening to, he mixes this "I'm a human, I'm one of you" with "I see things you don't." Right? Good speakers never give the audience the feeling that I am here and you're down there. No, you better listen to me. Good speakers always give the audience a feeling like I'm one of you. Same feelings, same fears, same emotions, same visions. I eat the same food, so I'm like one of you. So you connect with that person, and then in a very, very precise fashion, they make it very clear that they see things you didn't see. But in first place, by making sure that we're on the same eyesight, this is a conversation with friends, right? You're my three best friends, and we're on a dinner. No one wants to be smarter than the other, but you enjoy listening to someone because you know that we're on eyesight. But there are the few things that I see you don't see, and that's why you enjoy listening to me. Like the other, like in circulation, right? You know where your border, where your corner is, where you like, don't cross that line, because I'm not expert anymore. And when you have this, I don't know if that makes sense, but if you understand this tightrope of being one of them, and then, well, expert or very passionate, that makes a good talk.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. I think we all, even though we might be able to learn something from someone, when they come across that arrogantly, where they're trying to prove to you that they're the smartest person in the room, we tend to turn those people off, don't we?
Yeah, it's like, what you have this, like, what are you going to tell me that I don't already know? I don't enjoy listening to you, right?
And I think this really summarizes in one sentence, Ethan and Rob, what we try to do well in podcasting, which is, or not. So for example, what I try to do, I'm not saying I'm perfect at this, is instead of saying to Rob, will you educate, I know this, but will you educate my audience? Instead is, Rob, share with me how it is that you do this. This is if I'm interviewing somebody. Again, I'm trying to always put myself as I'm one of you, but I see things you don't see because of my experiences. I've done this maybe a little bit more than you, or I've done this before. So I bring to it my experiences. I think that's the way I look through it, as I see things you don't see. Is that fair?
Yeah, he's muted. You're muted.
Okay, sorry.
Absolutely. And what's also nice is you have, so the third part of the talk, what should they say differently after the talk? It's always good to have something where you rewire the brain. I'm giving you a quick test. Why do cars have brakes?
So they don't hit things.
Yes, so you can stop.
You can stop. And that makes total sense. We have brakes, cars have brakes to stop the car, right? That's true, but actually brakes allow us to go faster. Cars have brakes so we can drive, because no one buys a car not to die, right? So I've just shared what I just did was we're all on the same page. Brakes are there because they're for active safety, right? Stop the car. But as a matter of fact, we can only drive because we have brakes. You would never start driving a car if you wouldn't know that you can stop it, right? So brakes allow us to go faster. From now on, you will see, look at brakes from a different perspective. And there are a lot of aspects in life like this. Very often, and a method to get there very often is things we're used to accept, but we actually shouldn't accept them anymore. Let me give you another example. Every elevator in the world has a sign where it says, in case of fire, don't use the elevator. And we all accept this, but we shouldn't, right? We should go bonkers, because if the building is burning in the 50th floor, you want to be safe on the street in 2 minutes because you want to survive. And if the building is not burning, well, you should use the staircase because it's good for your butt. But if you're gonna die if the building is burning and you're not supposed to use the staircase, the elevator, you're gonna die in the staircase. So everyone accepts something we should actually not accept anymore. And there are a lot of things in life that we're used to having around and we're used to accepting them, but we should not accept them anymore. And when you look at the course, like what am I actually going to share with my audience in the next hour? It's good to extract one of these things where it pinpoints that here's something we should not accept anymore. What do you think about that? Right? And that's always a good source where people start thinking, because you want to ignite new thoughts, right? You don't want to planting seeds is a good anecdote because it's a metaphor, because it grows something out of it, but you don't want to force them to knowledge. You want to give them something that has its own dynamics in their brains. And when you go into these things we shouldn't accept anymore, right? If I'm this elevator company that develops the elevator it's safe to use in case of fire, and I go to, I don't know, Salesforce just built this huge tower in San Francisco, and I go there and said, here's the elevator. It's safe to use in case of fire, but it's twice as expensive. Well, whose elevator do you think they're going to buy? Still mine, right? Because it's an argument everyone will agree the second they hear it. This elevator is safe to use in case of fire, right? And this and all the others will be out of business overnight. So all of these things you have a lot of. Just have to like, okay, what's that core that I'm actually sharing with my people? Does it make sense?
We talk on our podcast, we've been talking about insights per minute a lot. And I think that among other things that we go to bring insights to the podcast and bring success stories and, tidbits of information and so on and so forth. But I think I'll add that to the things that I look for is, perspective shifts, counterintuitive pieces of information.
Yeah.
And just to go back to what you said about, the balance between resonating with someone and feeling like them versus listening to what they have to say. There's a study that I think I read about it in a book called Give and Take by Adam Grant. And they did two people to give the same, teach the same lesson. One actually did a bad job on purpose. One does a good job. And in the middle of the experiment, they have them both spill tea on them for one audience, right? They do the talk normally, and then on another one, they spill some tea on themselves accidentally. Oh, silly me, whatever. So the better person who gives the better talk gets better ratings when they actually spill their tea on themselves. The person who gives the worst talk actually gets worse ratings when they spill the tea on themselves. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of like this, people want some humanization when they're relating to you, but they don't want you to be stupid.
Yeah, but when they do relate to you, they forgive you more for those mistakes.
That's that personal connection
right.
we're talking about here.
Right. Hey, you're at about 4 minutes to the top of the hour.
Okay, cool. So yeah, we can wrap it up here. I think one thing I'll ask Nikki, just maybe for the last point we'll touch upon is when you're teaching about storytelling or when you're having someone tell stories, what is a counterintuitive thing, if any, that you have to introduce to them about how the story is going to go or how they're going to do well at that?
So we started doing something that's actually really stupid. We started bending ourselves into a version of ourselves we think people expect us to be. Everyone's been there that you were around people you don't really feel comfortable with. Everyone's been there that you've been around situations you don't really feel comfortable around, or jobs or projects. And that's basically a result of trying to be someone else. A really good method to becoming who you want to be is when you go to bed, ask yourself every evening, was today a good snapshot of myself? Was I the person I want to be? Because the more you ask yourself that question every day, the more you actually can identify who is that person I want to be. And the more you know who you want to be, the more you will hit the right nerve in finding the right words in building a narrative around your topic, because it's you. And I'm answering your question in that direction because I feel like very often speakers think that their audience expect them to be professionals.
Right. Yeah.
And that's not the case. they're already right. If there must be a reason why they're on a stage. There must be a reason why you have your mic in front of your mouth and you're talking to this. So you don't have to be professional, like, right? But for being you, you have to first know who is that person I want to be. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. And I think that's something that I find difficult to do reflecting on myself, but I work with other people to do that, right? They have to find their own strengths, right? And they can use other people as a guidepost to try to be like this person or this person. But really it's more about finding out, why do you like that person and how can you incorporate that into what you are, not be them, because being someone else. I mean, the best example of this is I've seen it myself and other people. You watch a movie, it was a Netflix movie about Michael Jordan. And I didn't really watch it, but I got the sense it was basically all about how great he is, and people felt bad about themselves after they watched the movie. They feel very frustrated. They feel like they haven't gotten to the right place. But the problem is you can't be Michael Jordan no matter what, that's part of the frustration. You need to be the best you, but you got to figure out what the best you is, right?
So a little life hack is when you're talking, and you can do this in between, force yourself to smile. And sometimes it feels awkward to smile, right? You feel like I'm a clown. But when it basically, beside the awkwardness, when it's okay to smile, you are where you're supposed to be. You can't be professional, like not you, and smile at the same time. Because you think like, this is not what I'm supposed to do. So when you're talking about something and you kind of like, there's no way I could smile right now, then it's not you. You're representing something and you're not what you're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think that's
It's all about being consistent, I think, at the end of the day, of who you are and how you're presenting yourself and what you as a brand represent. Right.
Well, and authentic, as you always talk about, Rob, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Nikki, where can we go to find out more about the services that you offer?
So a friend of mine, because it's so broad what I'm doing, so the essence is I'm passionate about changing the life of 10 people every week. I don't want to talk to thousands of people. I love these conversations where I feel like here's something I can give you. A friend of mine, so I asked a friend of mine who always inspires people, like, how would you call what I'm doing? He said, hey, Nikki, you're the business therapist. And I thought it's actually fun. So you can go to their #business therapist, and then you'd find me. It's a bit of a complicated URL, but that combines the tours, the workshops, the webinars, the public speaking, the new endeavor that I'm building right now, where I help companies outsource experiments. Complete different beast, but also very excited about this, because I think this is the time for outsourcing experiments. Companies have an immune system against change. So I'm offering them, you can outsource failing, because if it's a success, everyone wants it. That's how to design intrinsic motivation. Everyone wants a success. No one wants a failure. If it's a failure, I just deliver data what went wrong, and everyone's fine with it as well, and nothing happened in the core of the organization. So that's the innovation agency, the IACY. There's also IACY.com and the tours. As I said, check
great. That sounds great. Just to follow up on what you said, I don't know if I call him a brother-in-law or whatever. He's a relative of mine in some odd way, but he works for car companies and he helps them like put together their assembly lines and things like that. And he said that he's worked with Tesla, and I asked him, what's interesting things about that, and he's like, well, the hardest part about working with Tesla is that I needed to learn how to be able to be willing to make mistakes and fail, because they were all about, fail, you're gonna fail here, do this, there, fail fast. Right. But with the traditional car companies that he was working with, it was like, yeah, God forbid that you did anything that would look like a failure.
Yes.
Right.
But yeah, so that sounds like a very appropriate thing to get into, right? Let them save face, but still make progress. All right,
yeah,
cool.
I've got to drop off. I got another call I got to get on.
Catch you later, Rob.
Okay. Bye.
All right, Nikki, thank you so much.
Thanks, Nikki. It was nice to meet you. Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. Be in touch. See you later.